Now this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan.
That boy is Benny Hunter.
Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So you guys are all aware that the NFL Combine is officially underway, but there is currently a report out there saying that the Khalil Mack trade buzz has picked up during the Combine this week. Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune revealed this in his recent column. There is a buzz in Indianapolis around the 31-year-old former Pro Bowler. Multiple reasons exist for the Bears to consider it too. Mack still has plenty of value despite his age. He carries a heavy contract that the team may want to unload, and some wonder how well he will be able to handle the switch to a 4-3 defensive end when he's played most of his career as a 3-4 outside linebacker. Brad Biggs said this exactly. The name some folks in town are wondering about is Khalil Mack, the 31-year-old edge rusher who had 6 sacks in 7 games last season before heading to the injured reserve list. You know, I was dreading doing this podcast because I felt like eventually that this day would come. And I hate to ask this question to you guys, but it just has to be asked. Should the Chicago Bears consider trading Khalil Mack? And this is an absolutely tough question. A question that I will answer for you guys later on in the podcast. But the initial question is, should the Chicago Bears consider trading Khalil Mack? Let me know down below in the comment section. And let's talk about this a little bit. Because when you look at the Chicago Bears roster currently, and when you're thinking about what Ryan Poles is trying to do with the Chicago Bears roster, you may initially think, oh yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. But then on the other end, you think, wow, even at 31, Khalil Mack, it still has a whole lot of value. Yes, he had 12.5 sacks his first year, and then he hasn't hit 10 plus sacks since, right? But it's still a really hard question to answer. When you look at what Ryan Poles is trying to do, he's made it very clear that he's trying to bring in young players, add depth, right? Add playmakers around Justin Fields. And for years, the Chicago Bears have catered to the defense side of the football, right? They've always been a defensive football team. But maybe Ryan Poles is finally, for once, trying to cater to the offensive side of football. Build around your franchise signal caller in Justin Fields, which is what you usually do when you draft a quarterback that high. Obviously, we all know that the Bears only have 5 draft picks in this upcoming NFL draft. So I just wonder, in my heart, if Ryan Poles will actually listen to what these other teams may have to offer in terms of trading away Khalil Mack. So let's go in deep detail. Let's talk about this a little bit. Mack was traded to Chicago in 2018, where he made an immediate impact. We all know this already. In his first year as a Chicago Bear, he had 12.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and 10 tackles for loss, helping lead the Chicago Bears to a 12-4 record and a division title. And when I think about that 2018 year, we brought Khalil Mack as a win-now situation, right? Obviously, we won in 2018. Things looked great, but then obviously the next couple of years, the rest is history. Who can forget about what Khalil Mack did in that very first game in primetime in Lambeau Field against the Packers? It was like a moment for all Bears fans that we were like, wow, we just got a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent in Khalil Mack, and he proved his worth right away. But since 2018, and this is something I have to point out, since 2018, Mack has 8.5 sacks in 2019, 9 sacks in 2020, and 6 sacks in 2021. Obviously, 2021, he only played 7 games because of that injured foot. And I have to realize here, and I know a lot of people have been saying, you have to realize that the sack numbers have gone down for Khalil Mack. And I think that's what people judge Khalil Mack on at the end of the day, because that's the reason why we brought him to Chicago. But Khalil Mack does so many other things for this defense in order to make this defense a whole lot better. It is a lot about the sack numbers, but Khalil Mack makes his teammates better around him. But we do have to realize that his sack numbers have gone down. And for the most part, Khalil Mack has had a tough time, just a tough break, trying to stay on the football field. But I will repeat this until I'm blue in the face. Khalil Mack, yes, he is 31. But Khalil Mack still has a whole lot of value. Meaning that I would love to keep Khalil Mack. And going back to the point of switching to a 4-3 defense, what people fail to realize is that when he was in Oakland, when it was the Oakland Raiders, he was a 4-3 defensive end. That's when he won Defensive Player of the Year. He had a lot of success under that defense that was ran by Jack Del Rio. So I have no concerns about switching to a 4-3 with Khalil Mack at DN. I think it would be a beautiful sight to see. But then when you look at the long term, you start thinking, well, yeah, we have a lot of holes to fill. Khalil Mack is 31. He has a massive cap hit. You start thinking about all that stuff. You start going back and forth until you just go nuts in the head. And that's how I'm feeling at this moment. A lot of people would ask me, saying, hey, Keek, would the Bears be able to move Mack with his huge contract? Obviously, Khalil Mack's 2022 cap hit is set at $30 million. But, huge but, Mack, that could reduce to $24 million and create $6 million in cap space and take him off our books in 2023 and 2024 if we traded him. To add to that, any team trading for Khalil Mack would only be acquiring his base salaries and roster bonuses, which are non-guaranteed. This means that teams would have to pay $17.5 million in 2022, but wouldn't have to pay anything in 2023 or 2024 if it doesn't work out. That is still a massive cap hit at $17.5 million, especially for a 31-year-old pass rusher that is coming off a foot injury. I expect Khalil Mack to be fully healthy, but that may make some teams kind of hesitant. So my answer to that question is yes. Mack's contract is very tradable, but then you ask the question, does the team that's trading for Khalil Mack, do they want to pay that $17.5 million for a 31-year-old player coming off of foot surgery? Those are all questions to be answered. Obviously, if the buzz is growing, if those are the reports or those are the rumors, obviously Ryan Poles is talking to these other teams. He's letting them know that, hey, yeah, Khalil Mack will make a full recovery, which I fully anticipate that he will. So that shouldn't be an issue. Plus all the stuff I just mentioned. Obviously, it goes from a $30 million cap hit to a $17.5 million cap hit for any team that's trading for him. Because obviously, if a team that was trying to trade for Khalil Mack said, hey, we want to trade for Mack, right? But we don't want to take the $30 million cap hit. This wouldn't even be a conversation, right? No one's going to take on a $30 million cap hit in 2022. But $17.5 million may be more feasible for a team that is trying to acquire Khalil Mack. The most important thing to consider while in trading Khalil Mack, though, is what would be the market for Khalil Mack? What can the Chicago Bears gain in draft capital? And a lot of people think the Bears could earn a second rounder, a third rounder, and even a future mid-round pick for Khalil Mack. A perfect blueprint of what a trade involving Khalil Mack can look like is what Denver received in trading Von Miller to the Los Angeles Rams. When they traded him last year, the Broncos received a second rounder and a third rounder in 2022. And we have to remember that Von Miller was 32 years old at the time. Khalil Mack is 31. So pretty same ages right there, 32 and 31. So that is the blueprint. And obviously, for me, I always been been very adamant about this and very vocal about this in saying that I still truly feel that even at 31 years old, Khalil Mack is still a game changer, and I still feel like he is a first-round pick, worth a first-round pick. That's just how I feel about the situation. Some of you guys may disagree with that statement. You guys may say, yeah, maybe a couple of seconds, a couple other mid-round picks would do just fine if we decide to trade Khalil Mack. Obviously, when I look about trading Khalil Mack, there's a couple of teams that I can come on top of the dome. Obviously, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They have 2 first-round picks. Maybe the New York Jets. They have 2 first-round picks. I would go to teams that have a whole lot of draft capital and would be drooling at the bits to add a player like Khalil Mack. So, obviously, you can contact a team like the Eagles, a team that wasn't supposed to go to the playoffs last year, right? But they still did. Maybe adding a player like Khalil Mack to that defense, maybe that will take them over the top. You can contact them and say, hey, how about you give us one of your first-round picks, maybe a third-round pick, and a next-year mid-round pick? I would probably take that deal. Because at this point in Khalil Mack's career, I have to think about the long term. I have to think about us wanting to fill the other holes on the roster. And if that means trading Khalil Mack in order to get the entirety of the team better and build around Justin Fields, which at this point, that's who it's about, is making sure Justin Fields gets to the next level. This would definitely be a long-term commitment for Ryan Poles. And Poles made it very clear to us when he came in. He wants to build through the NFL draft. And let's be honest, trading Khalil Mack for multiple draft picks would help Ryan Poles add more resources to help his football team get better. His entire football team. We have need at cornerback, offensive line, middle linebacker, receiver. We can go on and on. I talked about this the other day on one of my episodes, is that the Bears are the second oldest roster in the NFL. We have a lot of older players that are overpaid. And I am not saying this is on Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack is still an excellent player. He has been such a productive player for the Chicago Bears since he was traded to Chicago back in 2018. And I know all you guys will agree with me with this. We would all love to see Khalil Mack finish career in Chicago. But unfortunately, the last regimen in Chicago wasted that win-now scenario. That's the only reason why we traded Khalil Mack, to try to get us over the hump. We thought it was going to work in 2018. It didn't. And then the rest is history. And now you have to think about the long term of this football team. Like my dad likes to say all the time. My dad brings this up to me probably every other day, saying, well, son, I know it sucks, but we're losing with him. As good as Khalil Mack is, as better he makes our defense, we are losing with Khalil Mack. And he's aging, but he still has value. So this is probably the perfect time to maybe unload Khalil Mack. And that really does hurt me to say that. But this team needs to get younger, and they need to fill multiple holes on the roster, and sacrificing Khalil Mack for not only more cap space and draft picks would accomplish that goal for Ryan Poles and what he is trying to accomplish for the Chicago Bears football team. Preferably, I'm looking for maybe a late first-round pick, but if a team comes offering us maybe multiple day 2 picks, I would also be okay with that. Because at this point, with only 5 NFL draft picks and for a GM that has made it clear that he's trying to build through the NFL draft, I think at this point, you would just take the extra draft capital and the extra cap space. So before I close out this video, I want to ask you guys this one more time. Would you guys consider trading Khalil Mack? Let me know down below in the comment section. Like I said multiple times in this podcast, in the moment, it would hurt. It would definitely hurt. We all thought Khalil Mack would be a Chicago Bear for the rest of his career. But we all have to understand that in the NFL, this is a business. This is just the business of the game. And change always happens in the NFL. And the closer and closer we get to the NFL draft, the more it seems that Ryan Poles is definitely considering trading Khalil Mack. Before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Geek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Geek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Geek on the Mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Geek on the Mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Geek on the Mic.